Today we are setting out on a huge journey, exploring what was probably the greatest trade network in ancient history, the Silk Road.
It's an amazing topic. We're talking about a system that 2,000 years ago connected entire continents. It didn't just move goods, it moved ideas, cultures, everything. It really did change the world.
And I think the first thing to clear up is that name, Silk Road. It makes you picture a single paved road, but that's not it at all, is it?
Not at all. It was a massive, sprawling network of paths, trails, and even sea routes. A web, really, that connected China all the way to the Mediterranean Sea.
So where did it all begin?
It really kicked off in China during the Han Dynasty. They started sending explorers and diplomats like Zhang Qian heading west. They were looking for new markets, new allies.
And in doing that, they basically stitched together all these smaller regional trade routes into one giant super network.
Exactly. And suddenly, the world's greatest empires were linked in a way they had never been before.
Okay, so let's get to that name, the Silk Road.
Mm.
Why silk? What made that one product so important that it defined the entire network?
Silk was the ultimate luxury good, the iPhone of its day, you could say. And its value came from one thing, secrecy. China had a complete monopoly.
Right, because they were the only ones who knew how to make it.
For centuries, yes. And for anyone who doesn't know, silk comes from the cocoons of silkworms, which only eat mulberry leaves. The process of unwinding those tiny threads and weaving them is incredibly delicate and complex.
A state secret.
A heavily guarded one. If you were caught trying to smuggle silkworms or their eggs out of China, the penalty was often death. They knew exactly how valuable that secret was.
So you can just imagine the demand in a place like the Roman Empire.
Oh, they were obsessed. Wearing silk was the clearest way to show off your wealth and status. It was lightweight, it was beautiful, and everyone knew it came from the other side of the world.
I've read that Roman politicians actually complained about it, that too much of the empire's gold was flowing east to pay for all this silk.
That's absolutely true. It was causing a genuine economic drain. It shows you this wasn't just about fashion, it was big-time international finance.
But it wasn't just silk, of course. What else was heading west from Asia?
A lot. Think porcelain. You know, those delicate but really strong ceramic dishes and vases? A total technological marvel for the time.
And spices.
Oh, yeah. Spices like cinnamon and ginger were incredibly valuable, not just for food, but for medicine, for perfumes, for religious ceremonies.
And then there's one that I think is just a total game changer. Paper.
Absolutely. The invention of paper in China and its slow journey west along these routes fundamentally changed everything. It replaced heavy, clumsy materials like parchment.
It made information easier to record, to share, to govern with.
Right. And you also had things like tea, which was pressed into these dense bricks, perfect for long-distance travel, and beautiful art bronze statues, jade carvings.
Okay, so we have this incredible flow of goods and technology moving from east to west. But trade is a two-way street, and has to be. What was the West sending back to the East?
That's a crucial point. It was definitely an exchange. From the Mediterranean, China was really interested in things like colorful glassware. They didn't have the technology to make glass like that.
So finished goods.
Finished goods, intricate jewelry, but also different kinds of textiles. You know, high-quality wool and linen, things that were different from their own silk and cotton.
But there was one import that was maybe even more important than glass or wool, wasn't there? Something strategic.
Horses, without a doubt.
The famous heavenly horses.
The very same. The Chinese military needed stronger, faster horses to fight the nomadic tribes on their borders. Their local breeds just weren't up to the task.
So these powerful Central Asian horses were basically a military asset.
A vital one. The Han Dynasty would launch entire military campaigns just to secure the supply of these horses. That's how important they were.
And it wasn't just goods. People brought back, well, new foods too.
Yeah, that's a great point. Traders came back with things like grapes, figs, and walnuts. They completely transformed Chinese agriculture and diets over time.
So with all this high-value stuff moving back and forth, silk for gold, horses for treaties, how are people actually paying for things?
Well, while some of it was barter, for the big-ticket items you needed currency. Roman gold and silver coins were used all along the route, a kind of universal currency for these major transactions.
Which brings us to the people who actually made these journeys. I mean, it must have been unbelievably difficult and dangerous.
Brutal. And you have to understand, almost no one traveled the entire route.
It was more like a relay race.
Exactly. A merchant would take his goods to the next major city, sell them to another merchant who would take them further, and so on. The goods might change hands dozens of times.
And they wouldn't travel alone.
Never. You'd travel in a massive group called a caravan, sometimes hundreds of people and animals. It was your only real protection against bandits.
And just the daily grind of it. Can you paint a picture of that?
It was exhausting. You're walking for 10, 12 hours a day. 1 month you're in a scorching hot desert. The next you're crossing a freezing mountain pass. You carry all your own food and water. It was incredibly tough.
But there were rest stops, places of refuge.
Yes, the caravanserais. These were basically fortified roadside inns. They were crucial.
So you could get a safe place to sleep, feed your animals, get water.
All of that. But they were also information hubs. This is where you'd hear news about which routes were safe, what prices were like in the next city, or if there was any political trouble ahead. They were the nervous system of the road.
And none of this travel would have been possible without one specific animal.
Ah, the true hero of the Silk Road.
The camel, the desert tank.
That's the perfect name for it. The dromedary and Bactrian camels were indispensable, especially for crossing deserts like the Taklamakan, which was nicknamed the Sea of Death.
Because they can go so long without water.
For days. They're just perfectly adapted. Their wide feet stop them from sinking in the sand. They're strong enough for rocky ground. And their endurance is just off the charts.
And how much could they actually carry?
A healthy camel could carry up to 500 pounds, or even more. They were the cargo trucks of the ancient world.
And they weren't just for transport, were they?
No, in the wilderness, they were a survival kit on legs. They provided milk. Their hair could be used for clothes, and their dung, when dried, was often the only fuel you could find for a fire.
Wow. Your entire life and livelihood depended on keeping those animals healthy.
100%.
So with all this movement of goods and people and money, huge cities must have sprung up along these routes.
They absolutely did. Cities like Samarkand and Kashgar became these glittering international hubs because they were right at the crossroads of major routes.
And inside these cities, what would you find?
You'd find these huge, bustling marketplaces called bazaars. And you have to imagine it would be a sensory overload. You'd see goods from Rome, Persia, India, and China all being sold in the same place.
A real melting pot.
The ultimate melting pot. You'd hear a dozen different languages. You'd see people from different religions all living and working together. All that wealth also supported art, science, and learning.
And this is where we get to the idea that the most important things traded weren't things at all.
It was ideas, technology,
Right.
culture. The art of papermaking, for example, spread from China through the Islamic world and eventually to Europe, where it helped fuel the Renaissance.
And other technologies too.
Of course. Things like the compass for navigation, mathematical concepts like algebra, new medical techniques, they all traveled along these routes and were improved upon as they went.
And beliefs too. Religion.
A huge one. Buddhism spread from India into China and Japan along the Silk Road. Islam spread from the Arabian Peninsula right across Central Asia. These weren't just trade routes, they were spiritual highways.
So despite all these incredible benefits, the whole system was pretty fragile. It faced constant threats.
It did. The dangers were always there. You had the bandits, of course, but nature was just as big an enemy.
Like what?
Well, high mountain passes like the Pamirs could be blocked by snow for months. And in the deserts, a sudden sandstorm could literally bury an entire caravan.
But there was a much smaller, invisible danger that was maybe the worst of all.
Disease. When you have people and animals moving across continents, they bring germs with them. The most famous and horrific example is the Black Death, which likely traveled from Asia to Europe along these very trade networks.
So for a long time, the profits were worth the risk. But eventually, the Silk Road's importance,
Yeah.
it faded. What happened?
Two main things, really. The first was technology. European explorers started finding sea routes to Asia.
And ships could carry way more than camels.
Exponentially more. And they were faster. It just became cheaper and more efficient to move goods by sea.
And the second reason.
Political instability.
Yeah.
The Great Mongol Empire, which had kept much of the route safe and stable for a while, collapsed. Wars broke out, and the land routes became too dangerous and unpredictable for large-scale trade.
So the money and the merchants moved to the sea lanes.
Exactly. And those once great cities of the Silk Road slowly declined.
But its legacy is just immense. It was really the first great experiment in globalization.
It was. It proved that different civilizations could gain so much by connecting with each other. The mixing of art, food, and ideas that started back then still influences us today.
It's true. I mean, think about your phone. It probably has parts made in 10 or 20 different countries. That whole global supply chain, that way of thinking, its roots are right here, with merchants loading up their camels.
They chose connection over isolation, and it set in motion the world we live in today.
Good luck with your studies.